We're looking at 5 different ways to create a clucking sound on the banjo. These are percussive techniques for Clawhammer Banjo. We'll start off with the cluck itself, and I know of 2 ways of creating a clucking sound. One is to use one finger of the right hand to actually strike the string, following it with another to deaden the string, in which case you'll hear a very bright sounding cluck, like that. I don't use this particular technique. Instead, if I want a clucking sound of that nature, I just use a very shortened knell on my right hand. And in my case, I use the ring finger, shorten it way down, and when I come in, the knell itself will strike the string. The pad of the ring finger will then deaden the string and create the actual clucking sound. If you move that finger up and down the neck, you'll create different harmonic overtones. It's just a matter of finding one that's very pleasing to your own ear, leaving your hand in that position, and then replacing the dit of the bump ditty stroke with that particular finger on the string. To create a clucking sound. Now, applied. And that's the cluck. The next technique we're going to look at is palm muting. This is a common technique for guitar players. The idea here is on the dit stroke, you actually extend your hand so that the palm of your hand comes in contact with the string, thereby muting them. So a basic bump ditty strum now will look something like this. The secret to making this work is to keep your hand and your wrist flat or arched, or in whatever manner you usually strike the bump stroke on, and then collapse the wrist and maybe even bring it down a little bit as you come in for the brush stroke, so you can mute it every time. It might sound something like this in an actual application. And that is palm muting. The third percussive technique is something that I call thumping. Basically, the idea here is that you are thumping the head of the banjo with your thumb as it naturally comes in against the 5th string. Now, in my playing, as many of you have noted, because of the way my banjos are set up, this happens just naturally. But I can accent this technique by using the brush skip technique. If you're not familiar with brush skips, I would recommend that you go back to my website, look at the handout and the MP3 file discussing brush skips. But on the thumping technique, I'm actually going to skip on the dit stroke. You'll hear my thumb come into the head, creating a drum sound on that particular beat, and it'll sound something like this. Creating again a very percussive effect. In an application, a little faster, and that's thumping. Okay, we're going to be looking at the 4th percussive technique. This is vamping. And it's something that you do usually out of a full chord position or partial chord position. This can be 2 strings, it can even be 1 string. But the whole idea here is on the dit stroke, you basically will just hit the chord or the single note, and then immediately relax the left hand, thereby deadening the strings. You can practice this by just doing a bump dit without the thumb. And here I'm holding an F chord, taking up 2 frets to create another G. Now, if I put that in with the thumb, I might end up with a sound like this. As I mentioned, this is also a technique that you can use on each of the individual strings as well. An example might be something like this. That's a vamp. Okay, this is the 5th and final technique that I use personally for percussive effects on the banjo. It's what I would call left hand muting, and the idea here is on simple songs that require mostly the middle and index finger to play, I can actually use my pinky or a combination of my ring and my pinky on the dit stroke to just lightly fall down against the strings, creating a clucking sound even when the strings are open, which is something that you can't do on the vamping approach that we talked about earlier. The idea here on a bump ditty pattern would be this. I'm trying to get a real clean sound on the dit and then adding the thumb. Like that. In an application, you might get a sound like that. A little faster. And that is left hand muting.